In our previous lesson, we jumped into Visual Studio to set up a project and get a bit of a tour around the user interface. In this lesson, we're not going to be in Visual Studio. Before we start to write code within Visual Studio to create our zero-touch nodes, we need to understand a few of the essentials of C# geared in a way that Revit users will understand. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So in this lesson, we're going to cover key terminology, code structure, and the methodology around using C# to create zero-touch nodes. Once again, this lesson is C# essentials for Revit users. So to get started, C# is an object-oriented programming language. So it works in a way to where it thinks on objects. Objects can have properties, a method, and all sorts of other things assigned to them. So on the screen, I have my dog. My dog's name is Vader, and he's the example that we're going to use in this case. In a moment, we'll jump into the Revit API and look at a Revit example. So in this case, my dog is of a category or namespace animals. So within C#, we have this overarching category that's called a namespace. In this case, he belongs to a namespace of animals. Within a namespace, we have a class. We have several classes. So in this case, he's a dog. In a namespace of animals, we can have cats, all these other things as well. We can have all these different types of animals within that namespace. So this is a class. He is of a class dog. Breaking that down a bit more, we can get some properties from him as well. So properties are queries on the individual objects within a class. In this case, he has a property of name. His name's Vader. He has a property of breed. He's a lab. And he has a property of fur color, which is black. So that's the example here, is all those are properties that you can get from this object that is Vader. In addition to properties, he has methods, which are actions on the object. So these are things that can change the object, do things to the object, or return more data by acting on the object. In this case, he has two in this example. He has a command, which is sit, and he'll sit, and stay, which he does pretty well. So that's a piece of the API that we're still working on, right? And a few other commands that aren't here as well. However, if we were to use a command that he doesn't know that's not in his API, like rollover, it's an action on an object that cannot be performed. This is very important to keep in mind because within the Revit API, we're limited to what the Revit API supports as well. That includes the Dynamo API and what's available to us. So something to keep in mind. If you can add a comments parameter to walls in Revit, you can do that with the API more than likely. There are a few things you can do in the UI that you can't do within the API. A notable example is creating scope boxes. You can't do it in the Revit API as of Revit 2024, and it's just one of those things people ask for and we still can't do it. So that is one thing, one skill that you're going to need to have when working with the Revit API. Let's go ahead and jump right into apidocs.co. There is a link in the lesson notes below for this website, but it is my preferred way of viewing the Revit API. So let's go ahead and hop onto that website now. All right, so here we are on apidocs.co. There is a Revit apidocs.com that you can use as well. I like this interface a bit more and a few of the features it offers. It also offers a code search, which we'll see in a moment. And it supports API documentation for a lot of AEC tools. We have Grasshopper, Navisworks, Revit, and Rhino Common on here. If you expand Revit, we do have access to all the different versions that they have loaded right now on apidocs.co. In this case, we have Revit 24, 23, 22.1, and so on. This goes all the way back to Revit 2015, which is pretty cool. So if you are working on older versions, you have access to those. Clicking on the version that we're going to use, in this case Revit 2024, we'll see all the different namespaces once again. So as mentioned before, with the dog example, namespaces are going to be those overarching categories that we're going to use within the Revit API. In this case, you see a creation namespace, a Revit.db namespace, architecture, electrical, mechanical should be in here, structural. Those are the big picture items of our namespaces. Clicking on something like architecture, we will see all the classes that are specific to architecture within that namespace. So we have baluster things, rooms should be in here as well. So we have room, room filter, room tag. Those are architecture specific. If I go back, we can also see that I have a whole lot of other options in here. in this autodesk.revit.db, this is going to be kind of the base namespace for most of the things we're going to work with the Revit API. So we have a whole lot of options in here. We have arc, area tag. I believe rooms still even in here because rooms are part of this base class as well. So this is kind of everything that we have in here. We have roofs. Rooms are specific to architecture, and we can see that they're not in this list actually. So we have a whole lot of different things in here. If we do Control F, we can probably find wall in this list, and it is going to find wall everywhere. So we'll learn a better search here in a moment. So this is the API. That's going to go back a couple times. And we can also see that we have a section in here for what's new. So every year that the Revit API gets updated along with Revit, they have a what's new list for things that change, things that are added, and so on. So big changes for Revit 24 element ID changes. That doesn't impact you a whole lot unless you have things that are cross-compatible with several versions. That we can I'll link to some resources in the lesson notes for that as well. And we can see that there are a few different things in here as well. In 24, topography was replaced with topo solids, so that's another thing as well. And we have some other changes. There should be additions in here, so if you scroll through, you'll start to see other kind of additions and changes, things removed, some analysis additions, and it's really good to go through these and look at them every year. Every year when a new Revit version comes out, I look at this right after looking at the new features of Revit because I want to know what's added for the API. A lot of times things are added to the UI, and a lot of the time there are things added behind the scenes that aren't available in the UI yet for future releases potentially. So it's kind of a cool cheat code, if you will, if you're developing for Revit with zero-touch nodes or other C# methods as well, as you're kind of ahead of the game in that way. You know what might be coming down the pipeline, which is pretty cool. All right, so with that, what's new, I encourage you after this lesson's complete to look through all the what's new on apidocs.co. It's pretty interesting to look at to see what they've added, so I encourage you to check that out. Let's go ahead and navigate to the search bar and type in wall. So by typing wall, it's searching for all the classes, methods, properties within the API for wall. If we scroll, we should eventually find a wall class. So let's see if we put a space after it. We have wall utilities. Wall type is pretty close. In the search, it's kind of a hit or miss. So what we're going to go ahead and do is go to wall type. And what that does is it takes us in the toolbar. It shows all the different classes available to us. And as we can see, we are down here on wall type. If we scroll up, we'll see wall class. Clicking on that will show the members, the methods, and the properties. So if we go ahead and click on members, it lists everything, methods and properties. Clicking on methods will show all the individual methods, and properties will show the individual properties. So with walls specifically, for methods, we can create walls. So it shows all the different ways that we can create walls with the Revit API. So right here we can create one from curves, we can create one with a wall type ID, level IDs to attach them, and all these crazy things. So all these ways are ways that we can create walls. If we go to properties, we'll see all the different properties on wall objects. So in this case, there's certain ones that inherit from the element base class. So once again, the dog example, he is of a namespace animals and then a class dog. Dogs always have fur for the most part. They have their 4 legs, their tail, all that stuff. Those are things that he inherits from that class of dog. In this case, walls inherit bounding boxes from elements, categories, things that every element in Revit have, walls will have. And for the most part, you will see that here on the inherited from element option. Another place that you see that carried over is you will see that it's inheriting with this little colon symbol from host object. Host objects inherit from element. So all those things carry down into the subclasses of these base classes of element. So everything in Revit's an element. So for the most part, everything's going to share bounding boxes, categories, and all those kind of properties. Specific to walls, we do scroll down, we will see that we have wall type. That is a property that walls have that other elements don't. Width, view specific is inherited. Structural usage is specific to walls. And there are a few other ones in here as well. Is stacked wall. So this is a property that tells you if a wall is a stacked wall. Clicking on that property expands it a bit more. And we can see that that method, or that property rather, is stacked wall. it returns a Boolean. So we're going to learn about data types in the next lesson, but a Boolean is a true or false value. So pressing is stacked wall on a wall returns a true or false value of if it is a stacked wall. So kind of cool. When we get into actually coding, we'll use some of these methods on walls to create some zero-touch nodes within Revit to see how they report their values. So kind of interesting. With that in mind, I encourage you after this lesson to go through the API and just search a few things. Family instance is a good one to look at. Rooms are a good one to look at for architects. Ducts are a good one to look at for our MEP people out there. Structural framing for structural people. Whole lot of different things we can look at and see what properties are available to us that we might want to mess with in the future. So I encourage you to check that out. All right, so with that in mind, you do have an understanding of some of those C# essentials for Revit users. We looked at it with a simple example of a dog, and then we also looked at it within the Revit API itself through api.docs.co. Once again, there are links to those websites in the lesson notes for this lesson, and I do encourage you to take a peek at the Revit API and take a look through all of it after this lesson. With that in mind, we will see you in the next lesson.